that Democrats had. Mr. Secretary, you keep saying that he is the best commander-in-chief we've ever had, the best negotiator.
Talk to the troops.
13 American troops have died. More than 380 have been wounded. The Strait of Hormuz, which was wide open, is now closed. Less than 90% of traffic through the strait is still not going despite the ceasefire. The Iranian regime is still in power. It still has nuclear material. The war is costing Americans billions of dollars. And Mr. Secretary, if you think that this is what winning looks like, then maybe we should be questioning your mental stability. Maybe you are the one responsible for this failure, and the president should think about replacing you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields
for
back.
the wrong
Chair, I
side.
recognize
Not
the gentlelady
surprising.
from Virginia, Ms. Kiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us. I have the privilege of representing Virginia's 2nd Congressional District, so Hampton Roads, home to a lot of our East Coast Navy. And I had the privilege of attending the VFA 106 Change of Command on Friday, which is our fleet replacement squadron for the F-8, for the aging F-18s. But what an awesome event. And to talk to some of the Navy leadership that was there and to listen to them say firsthand just about the morale of the squadrons that are currently deployed on the USS Ford, specifically talking to leadership. A lot of our children serve. It's a family business for those of us in naval aviation. And they're like, don't believe the media. The morale's amazing. Those guys are doing tip of the spear mission work. I live with a retired F-18 pilot husband who also is begging to find a way to get back in the cockpit because he's jealous of what he sees. So just that type of mentality. Thank you for that. I know that they're doing a mission, and keeping them engaged is an important part of the fight. Along those same lines about naval aviation, I would love to hear, Mr. Secretary, your thoughts about the future of naval aviation. I know that this is a budget hearing, so last year's budget we had $900 million that we were looking forward to using in the FAXX program, and then the fiscal year 27 request was reduced to $140 million. And I, of course, keeping tabs on the Air Force, $5 billion for their F-47 program. So we love aircraft carriers. We love that mobile air superiority piece. What are your plans for the future of naval aviation? I kick and scream every day of the week here in this committee about the F-35s and getting them at our East Coast Master Jet Base. I know the FAXX is our next generation strike fighter, but just would love to hear your plans and timelines for the future of naval aviation.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and then I would defer to the chairman, too, on it, on the remaining utility of the F-18s, which are still flying critical missions right now off our carriers and do a fantastic job.
30-plus years old, but yes.
Yes, correct, which is why the issue of the FAXX is important. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's a matter of trade-offs in industry and design and capabilities, ensuring we're not slowing other things down at the behest of others. So I think in August, the August timeframe is, I'm sure you're familiar with that, is what we're looking at. It's a critical capability that we need to fund for the future of naval aviation. I would defer if anything you want to add.
Sure, I think you covered it. We don't need access basing and overflight off of a CSG and a CVN, and so it gives the Secretary and the President a lot of options. So, and I just want to echo the thanks for the Joint Force, on behalf of the Joint Force, for all 3 CSGs that are out there getting after it right now. I share your husband's jealousy, but just want the force to know how much we appreciate him, especially the Ford.
Thank you. Thanks very much, General. And then, Mr. Secretary, just again representing a big Navy district and having just a concern for the Navy, could you shed any light on why the Secretary of the Navy was relieved and what that timeline to replace him looks like for permanent leadership? I think that's one of the reasons why we struggle with even, I think, about the basing decisions and, again, naval aviation, and I wish we would talk more about just the contributions of our aviators, but could you shed any light on that issue?
Well, as the President stated, we thank the previous Secretary for his service, appreciate a lot of the initiatives that he undertook. Ultimately, it was time for a new leadership and a new direction as far as running fast toward those objectives, and so we made a change. We think it's hard personnel is policy, and the sooner you identify, especially, we talked about general officers, as you're evaluating whether they're running with the mission they've been given, you got to make a change if they're not. The same with civilians, and in this case, we made that change.
And any timeline to replace or have a new Secretary of the Navy appointed?
Well, right now we have an acting in Hung Kao who's did a fantastic job as the number 2, and he'll be acting for now. And I would imagine we'll know in due time.
Thank you. And then General Kane, I know you're a VMI graduate, and I know you're watching some of the partisan attacks that have been going on with some of our senior military academies, specifically in Virginia. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts or have had any discussions about how we can remove some of our senior military academies from these partisan state politics. I think it requires a further discussion. We had 170 Army ROTC officers that we commissioned out of that school specifically, but we've seen pushes to shut down, defund, replace their board of visitors. Any thoughts on how we can be more protective of those great schools?
Well, ma'am, you sort of started where I'm going to land on the importance of staying politics as the chairman and not unintentionally or inadvertently stepping into a political matter where I should not. As the secretary said, people are policy, and policies are things that we don't do in the joint force. I appreciate all of the commissioning sources that are out there.
Gentlelady's
Great
time's
leaders
expired.
come in. So
Chair, now
apologies.
recognize the gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and Member Smith, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. This committee is being asked to consider a $1.5 trillion DoD budget request that funds not only weapons and system programs, but the people, leadership, readiness, and trust required to make them effective. When senior leaders are removed abruptly or merit-based promotions are disrupted without clear explanation, Congress does have the responsibility to understand the rationale and operational consequences. So I'm going to focus on Secretary Hegseth. And to start, no one is disputing that senior officers serve at the pleasure of civilian leadership. The issue in front of this is whether the decision to remove General Randy George strengthened the Army or created an avoidable disruption during an active operational period. General George, who also served as commanding general at 1st Corps at JBLM, has been serving for 4 decades, including multiple command and operational leadership roles, culminating as Chief of Staff of the Army, responsible for readiness, force modernization, and the welfare of over 1 million soldiers and civilians. He was removed in the middle of an active conflict involving U.S. operations against Iran, when leadership continuity is most critical. Public reporting indicates that General George's removal may have followed disagreements over Army personnel matters, including concerns regarding withheld promotions. So my question, Secretary, is this: what specific national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern did General George present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict, or was he removed because he challenged some decisions being made?
As I stated earlier, out of respect to these officers, I don't discuss the nature of the removal, but I would ask an earnest question of you: where does General George fall in the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you, why did you fire him?
No, but
don't change
you
the
talked
subject,
about
sir.
you talked about an
Please
operational
answer my
moment.
question.
Where does General
Please
George
answer
fall
my
in the
question.
No, it's a simple
National
question.
risk,
You're on the House Armed
mission
Services
risk,
Committee.
Leadership concern. What did he present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict?
Do you know where General George serves in the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you my question one more time, sir. Don't try to flip it on me. Why was he removed? Was he a national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern?
We don't.
Yes or no?
We don't talk about the nature of
okay. Don't
removals,
answer
but
the question.
you
It's all
also
good.
won't answer
So
where
to
he
be
is in the
clear,
operational chain of
you
command because
removed
he
the
isn't
Army's
in it.
Mr.
He
Chair, I'm
isn't
gonna
in the
reclaim my time.
operational chain of
Gentlelady
command.
reclaimed
reclaim
your
my
time.
Yeah, we're going to
You want to tie it to the war, but you don't
Sir?
even know where he is in the chain
Secretary,
of command.
Show some
It's
respect,
the
okay?
gentlelady from Washington's time.
Under DOD 1320.04, the Secretary of Defense may withhold or disapprove forwarding nomination after service recommendations in limited circumstances, including newly identified adverse information, pending investigations, reportable information, and questions regarding mental, physical, moral, or professional qualification, incomplete or non-compliant nomination packages, missing certifications, or the need for additional clarification from the military department. Several colonels reportedly selected for brigadier general were removed or withheld after board selection and service certification. Which of these specific grounds applied to each withheld officer, and what objective evidence supported these decisions?
Congressman, that was just one of many boards across the services where we will perform similar reviews, and I anticipate other officers will be removed also.
Okay, but what were the grounds for those?
Again, we don't talk about, out of respect for those officers, we don't talk about the nature of that, and we all serve at the pleasure of the president. We're solving for an institution that needs to be based on merit and professional execution, and there's been a lot of gender and demographic engineering that's been going on for reasons other than the focus of exactly what we should be doing on the battlefield. So whether it's that or
I did not raise
execution,
gender.
that's implied in every statement that everybody makes. And
I
so
did not- I did not
ultimately, as
raise
we
that.
review all these boards, it has nothing to do with anything other than their performance on the battlefield or their performance in their career.
And these people are thoroughly vetted, thoroughly researched,